Hey everyone, we're coming on the air with breaking news, a major development of the case against former President Donald Trump concerning those classified documents found at his Florida home. Just moments ago, the special counsel's office announced the former president will face new charges as part of that case, including obstruction of justice and willful retention of classified documents. In addition, we now also know a new defendant has been named. It is a Mar-A-Lago employee named Carlos De Oliveira. That now makes three men who are defendants in this case: Mr. Trump, his valet, Walt Nauta, and now Carlos De Oliveira. The case involves those highly classified documents found throughout the former president's Mar-A-Lago estate after he left office. That indictment marked the first time in history a former president was charged by the Justice Department. Mr. Trump has pleaded not guilty to all 37 felony counts related to his alleged mishandling of classified documents. I'm joined now by our senior legal correspondent, Laura Jarrett. A lot going on here this afternoon. Walk us through it.
Yes, Lester, we have a significant development here. As you laid out, the former president of the United States now facing additional charges related to that federal grand jury investigation in Florida about his keeping and alleged mishandling of classified documents after he was no longer in the White House. The special counsel's office just sent out a release laying out what's new, which was quite helpful to us, adding that in this new superseding indictment, which is what you do when you have new evidence, new developments, he's being charged with one additional count of willful retention of national defense information, which means he kept classified documents at Mar-A-Lago after he was no longer supposed to. But perhaps the most significant development we have here that is new is that the special counsel, the prosecutors at DOJ believe that Mr. Trump, Mr. De Oliveira, and Mr. Nauta, his two associates at Mar-A-Lago, they believe that he attempted to delete surveillance video from Mar-A-Lago in the summer of 2022, which is something we had not heard before. Obviously, there had been lots of reporting out there about their alleged obstruction of the government's efforts to retrieve those documents. But this is the first time that Mr. Trump has ever faced charges related to deleting surveillance video, Lester.
But these are acts that occurred within a larger crime that has already been reported. So why would they add these additional charges?
Because the grand jury that was investigating this entire affair was still ongoing. And when you have a situation like that, they can bring new charges if they get new evidence. And we knew that other witnesses had been before that grand jury. There had been reporting that other additional Trump organization employees had actually received a target letter even after the former president had been indicted. And so it makes sense if new information comes to light, including, as the special counsel believes, that he actually attempted to delete surveillance video.
So what is that in terms of adding to the weight of the charges in general? Does this move the needle in this case dramatically?
Well, what he was facing already in this multi-count indictment was already serious. I think the affirmative act of actually deleting evidence certainly adds a new dimension to it, and it certainly ups the ante, if you will. But he was already, as you know, and as you are well aware, was facing quite a number of years for those obstruction counts. Even one of those can range in 20 years. Not to say that that would be something that would actually come to pass in this case. He obviously has said he did nothing wrong, has pleaded not guilty in this case. But I think this is a significant development as it provides a little bit more color into the government's case, and the investigation is ongoing. So there may be even more that comes out of this, and certainly adding a new defendant adds another layer of complication. But one thing we should note, Lester, is given this development, they had a trial date in this case set for May. That is almost certainly now expected to slip. If you add new charges, you add new complications, and the idea that May trial date, which was already pushing it from Judge Cannon there in Florida, it seems far-fetched that will stick.
Let me bring in our colleague, Danny Savalas. Danny, this comes on a day that we were all on edge with this anticipation we might see a new indictment related to the efforts to thwart the 2020 election results. What do we know, or what can you glean from what's happened here in terms of what happens next in that case?
Yeah, I'm just getting through this document here, but at the same time, I mean, this has no effect on the timing of the January 6th investigation, whether or not we'll see an indictment, whether or not Trump would be named in that indictment. But you folks brought up a very good point. You're looking at that. There's a very good way of figuring out what's new about this superseding indictment. Sometimes it can be difficult, but one of the things that most federal indictments do is they tell you right up top what statutes are being charged. And you see there the one difference between the first indictment and this superseding indictment is Section 1512 B2B. And so you can go pretty quickly through a large document and find out that the new charges relate to, because the other charges related to basically the same kind of statute. The new ones relate specifically to destroying, mutilating, concealing records or documents, including, in this case, it appears, video footage that may have been destroyed, at least according to the indictment. Now, normally folks think, well, is an indictment, shouldn't it be the final statement of prosecutors? But prosecutors obtain superseding indictments all the time as their investigation moves on. So there's never a promise that this is the last superseding indictment. You may see a second superseding indictment, a third superseding indictment. But one might think also that the special counsel's office will want to be as complete as they can and avoid successive superseding indictments. They'd probably want to wrap it up maybe with one or two. But again, there's no rule requiring that they do so. So all this tells us is that the special counsel's office is still at work. It tells us virtually nothing about what we can expect for a January 6th indictment. And I have to say what Laura said was exactly right. I've said this before. The May trial date for the documents case was never going to go forward. I didn't know why at the time, but the reason is unexpected things happen. This is one of those unexpected things. That trial date will almost certainly now end up getting pushed out.
And there, of course, is a political campaign, a presidential campaign during all this. Danny, thank you. Let's go back to NBC senior Capitol Hill correspondent Garrett Haake. We have heard from the former president through social media today, but correct me if I'm wrong, he did not telegraph the possibility of new charges in that original federal case.
No, that's right, Lester. The former president has been kind of firing away on social media today, mostly reposting claims he has made previously, talking about the idea of all these cases against him being a witch hunt. To the degree that he engaged with any of the cases against him today, it was with a statement describing this meeting that his attorneys had at the special counsel's office earlier today. He said that was a productive meeting. He said his attorneys made the case that he should not be charged, had committed no crime, and that a further indictment against him would be bad for the country. But this specific news today appears to have caught the former president to some degree off guard. A statement from a spokesman a little while ago talked about the idea that the additional charges here against this third person were nothing more, as the spokesman writes, than a continued desperate attempt by the Biden crime family, as they say, to harass President Trump and those around him. It's not clear to me that when this statement was authored, the Trump campaign was even aware that there would be additional charges against the former president. So I think it speaks to the breadth of the legal challenges against him and the amount of fires that they're going to have to put out simultaneously. In this case, with members of overlapping legal teams. You know, one of the lawyers on the classified documents case was here in Washington, D.C. today for that meeting with the special counsel about the elections case. So, Lester, the political and the legal very much colliding for the former president and current Republican frontrunner for the nomination in 2024.
All right, Garrett, we'll ask you to stand by. Laura, so what does this mean in terms of the possibility? There's now a third defendant in the Mar-A-Lago case. Does this suggest the possibility that someone among them is going to flip?
Well, it's certainly what prosecutors would like to see happen, but thus far it is not as what we've seen as it relates to Walt Nauta, the person who was originally charged with the former president, known as his body man, his one-time valet in the White House, who then went with him down to Florida. So obviously prosecutors would hope that this latest defendant, a maintenance worker who also worked in Florida, would eventually cooperate. But as of right now, we don't have any indication to believe that would happen. I would also just note here, Lester, that the charge as it relates to the willful retention of classified documents, keeping those documents at Mar-A-Lago, we don't have much information about what that document might be, although it is now described in this new indictment as a presentation concerning military activity in a foreign country, Lester.
And, of course, they claim to have evidence of the video evidence and of some of these documents being moved as well. Laura, thank you very much. That concludes this NBC News special report. We'll have much more on nightly news, which for many of you will start right now. I'm Lester Holt, NBC News New York. Thank you for watching. Thanks for watching our YouTube channel. Follow today's top stories and breaking news by downloading the NBC News app.